Thanks for coming by. It's another chill stream with Matterall from Talking in Stations. We do a podcast about EVE Online, and this is Thursday. How are you guys? Thanks for joining me. Let's talk about some EVE Online and what's going on there. I was describing just a second ago time zones for people who may not know what that means and what the considerations are. And this'll actually be interesting to cover because it's important for what's going on in some of the wars that are happening right now. Uh, because it's a world game, you have people who basically can play the game in their leisure time since they have jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And so they play. The time zone is usually it's after work on a weekday, so between 5 and 10 p.m. in whatever part of the world they are in. So you'll have the European time zone coming right about now. It's going to start in about an hour. And if you're in a little further east than that, say if you're in England or France, or Spain, it's about 5 o'clock there now. And then if you're a little further east, you're probably about 6 p.m. I think somebody said, tell me what time zone you guys are in and type it in there in chat and we'll see where you guys are at. It's kind of interesting.
Well, Matterall, I play UK time zone, and it's quite interesting when I get back from work. It's kind of like the drop-off time for the Chinese time zone and the beginning of the Russian time zone as well. So you get that really interesting mix with the test frat war at the moment.
Oh yeah, that's why they settled there. Interestingly, um, so this is a good. And the thing is that people will come and watch the show when they get home and are relaxing and unwinding. But once the fleet starts, they want to get in on that fleet. They're not going to watch this show. So you'll see people like join this stream and kind of watch it for a while, and then the numbers will dip a little bit later, and you can kind of feel people are starting to get into the game and play it, or they've wandered off to do something that evening with family or something like that. So it's interesting to see as I look at analytics the movements of people as they come and go. So all that to say that Talking Stations actually started on a Friday night, right? Because it was a U.S. show and it was just best for me. In fact, I was hiding it from my wife. I was I was saying I was working late on Friday nights, and luckily it wasn't a date night or anything like that, so I could get away with it. And so I would do Friday night shows as long as I could. I couldn't do Thursday nights because that would have been a night that we did have something to do in real life, but also Open Comms was on Thursday night. So then what happened is that I decided that Friday night was just getting too iffy. Like I didn't know if I could do the show, and if I didn't do the show, then nobody really needed to show up. So anybody that I had planned on Thursday, hey, show up on Friday so we can do the show. And then if I got a call saying, hey, it's Friday night, we got to go do something, I'd have to call those people back and say, I'm sorry, there's no show. Or I'd have to find someone to replace me, which is probably what I did once or twice. So that got too iffy, and I decided, well, yeah, bring back Mrs. Matterall. Moxie Matterall. You know what? She still talks about that show. I had her on a show. She had a great time, even though she was very serious when she did the show, and she just loves talking about it. She's brought it up 6 or 7 times since then. So I will bring her back, and every time I say like, hey, yeah, people actually remember you, she gets really flattered. So things have changed quite a bit since this whole thing started. But the Friday night wasn't working out, and I was feeling really terrible about hiding something right from my wife. So I just thought this is bad. This is not a good sign. So then I said, look, I want to do this podcast, but I'll do it before the house gets started, before the morning. So I'll do it really, really early in the morning on Saturday, and it won't interfere with our life. So she's like, well, okay, as long as it's not loud or whatever. And so I was waking up at 5 in the morning on Saturday to do Talking in Stations, and this would be about the end of season 1, beginning of season 2. Sorry, this is 2017. And that worked out, except I was just daffy drunk from lack of sleep, and it was not. It was actually pretty cool because at 5 in the morning, do the math for me. 5 a.m. Pacific time. What time is that in UK? Somebody tell me and type it in there. I forget what it is. It should be 8 or 9 hours
It's
ahead.
like it's like 1 in the afternoon, midday to 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's like lunchtime, right? So like a Saturday
Yeah,
lunchtime show for you guys, but for me it was still dark outside. And I was, but what was really cool was it got more people than Friday night, and uh, that was a real surprise. I also wanted to get more European guests, like like you, Sarah. So that was part of it. Was I felt like we couldn't ask anybody to show up at 2 in the morning their Saturday for the show. So when the time switched a few hours ahead, it was noon Saturday for most of Europe. Then I could actually get guests, and they started showing up, and we started getting a lot of traction. And I was just really satisfied with the switch. And oddly enough, at that time, Dirk McGurk from Open Comms was really tired of the show for many reasons. And he's like, I'm quitting, and this is the date that I'm quitting. And right when he was about to quit, I made the adjustment. Totally separate, completely different considerations. And that opened up, we were all on INN. I forgot to mention that. We were all on INN, right? And I was kind of the creative director, kind of like the product manager and stuff like that. So I had a lot of influence on the streams. I had a lot of influence on the site itself, how it was built, the articles that were written, stuff. A lot of that was still, I was very, very influential in that sort of stuff at the time. And then what that did was that freed up Friday night, and Dirks was like, oh, I can do Friday night. And so he switched to Friday night, and that kind of revived him. Because before he was thinking like this Thursday thing's not working, because he'd get hammered on the show because that's what that show's about, and then Friday he would just be dead all day long and it was unproductive. So yeah, that's what Talking in Stations was like a couple years ago. Okay, let me ask a question here from Jade Cougar Matterall. Jade Cougar, by the way, is old school podcaster, really great stuff called Lost in Eve, and even he formed Lost in Eve into an alliance. I think it was just what it sounds like, Lost in Eve, LIE. And LIE was part of, I would say, I don't know if they were Clusterfuck or if they were Northern Coalition, but they were in the north, right up there with Gents. And Gents was Gentleman's Agreement. Gentleman's Agreement was a pretty good alliance and stuff. Yeah, so part of the CFC. And oh yeah, and before that, the HBC, the Honey Badger Coalition, which would have been Test and Pandemic Legion and others in the South. That was they were a precursor to the Fountain War. Well, anyway, so Jade Cougar had the show Lost in Eve. Oh, I was going to say, and Lost in Eve made this alliance, and the alliance merged with Gents. So you have two alliances, Gentleman's Agreement and LIE, that merged and became the Bastion. And that's how the Bastion came into existence. And Jade, I think, left the game for a long time, and Carneros took over the Bastion, and he's been running it ever since. But Jade Cougar was Lost in Eve. That was his program. He was very good on it. He was very much the guy that knew the stuff, and so he would be explaining like what was going on in Eve Online and stuff. It would be good to get him on a podcast because I enjoyed listening to his shows. They're really well done. So you were missed. I hope you come back at some point. I'm glad you're playing Eve Online again. It's nice to see you there. And Jade asks me, and he asks a great question because he knows the sensitivities of a podcaster. Oh, let me get back to that question, and we've blown right past it. Okay, what made you do the show in video rather than just audio podcasting? And that is a very good question. Originally, this streaming thing was coming up, and it was when people like, oh my gosh, what's her name? Mint Chip 101, who was a very delightful young lady, very pretty, and I think that got her into a lot of trouble with Eve people. But I guess people thought she was, some people, her detractors thought maybe she was annoying or she had undeserved attention or who knows what, Let's face it, Eve is hard on girls that don't look like they belong. It's very immature in that way. Well, anyway, this Mint Chip and somebody else, I forget her name at the moment, used to do YouTubing, and so they would record themselves like I'm doing now, and then they would edit it and put out an edited news feed, and that was what was going on there. But that was a few years before I started. When I started, the streaming thing was starting, and I really wanted to do a podcast. I don't know if you ever heard Eve News 24 podcast, but I did that one too, and that was very produced. It was recorded offline, edited, cleaned up, and then I actually put music to it and put sections in, and the sections had their own little like music, and it was a great little thing. And we went 22 shows, I think, before we just before I moved from Eve News 24 to the Matani.com, which became INN. And that was a great experience. I had a lot of fun doing that. So when I was at INN, I had the same ambition to do a Friday talk among editors. It was really supposed to be a roundtable of editors. That quickly fell through because I think at the time the editors were not really up for it. I don't remember why that fell through. So then I was like, okay, well, it'll just be me. I'm an editor and I can do this. And then I was like, should I? Well, then it formed into something else, but I'll get to that later. And then when I thought, okay, well, I'll just do this recording and I'll invite people and I'll interview them and we'll just talk. I just thought, well, we'll just put that on, we'll just stream that. We'll stream that and we'll put visuals on the screen like maps. So when we're talking about a certain region, we can actually look at the region. And I honestly thought that when you talk about Detroit and you talk about how Detroit and Omist, there's fighting on the border there, you can't really envision it very well. So part of the reason we do visuals was to show the map all the time. And when we're talking about a war zone, to show you what systems we're talking about. When we're talking about people, to show you what people we're talking about. And that was the idea. So yeah, so there we are, 5 in the morning for me, but noon for people. And let me say this last thing, Jade, about that. When you record like this, when you record talking and then you have 4 or 5 people talking, and that's the show, it was supposed to be like, let's talk. Okay, everybody take a break. Let's take 5. And you keep the camera going. So all the people watching the visuals were always getting the behind the scenes. And then we take the audio track of that and we would cut that into a produced podcast and put it out there with film in sections and segments. And that was the idea. So let the behind the scenes be shown, put up some maps, and then produce a podcast in the normal way. And I figured it would just be more ways it was letting people into the process. The problem was that the recording was when the cameras are on and people are watching, like there's a live audience now, the problem with that is that the pressure builds not to have dead air, because it's a lot more than a second and a half of nobody talking starts to feel weird. And if you ever watched the taping of, I always forget their name, but they were a podcast that was out a while ago. What was their name? Smash something, Brain Smash or something. Anyway, you guys know which one. Mind Clash. If you ever watched the making of Mind Clash, they did do it that way. And watching the show was really, really hard because there's just so much dead space, which was totally fine because you can cut all that out in a podcast. But as a watching experience, it just wasn't very exciting. And so as people showed up, we wanted to put on the show, and it started to kind of make the show, make the podcast a live event. And so everything that we do on Talking in Stations is like, curtain goes up, you're on, and you go at game speed. You don't take breaks. You don't slow down. You don't sit there and look something up. All that has to be done beforehand. And then when you're done, you cut. And then we take that audio and we put it up. We do clean it up, right? And I think if you haven't seen me clean up audio, there's a video of me doing it. I think some of you have, except if you've seen me clean audio and prepare the podcast. I want to see if people in here have seen it. But it's a lot of work. You have different tracks, and you clean, silence people, and you take out size, and you take out mouse clicks, and you try to take a lot of that stuff out. and and McLeod actually does some of the editing there. That's why he's. Are you in here, McLeod? I think you're in
I am,
here.
yes.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Let me finish with this section about the podcast, and then we'll get to talking about other things. So when you finish the edit, you put that out as a podcast, and you have this video that goes with it. So if somebody wants to visualize some of the stuff that we were putting up, there's that capability. And if people just want to listen to it in their car, there's a good clean version of that that's prepared for them. Which I think is the best way to listen to Talking in Stations is the podcast, because we've taken out all the delays or the the misstarts and stuff like that. Sometimes it's a big difference, sometimes no difference at all. It's the same. So it just depends on how much editing was done that week. And it is very time consuming. It takes like 3 hours per podcast to clean up and to fix, and I do that most of the time. And I've got it down to a good method. Plus, I make the artwork that goes with it and all that kind of stuff. So it's about a 3-4 hour process that I have to do. And oh, good. I appreciate you guys liking the podcast. Thanks, Jorox3. Ooh, and a subscription. Thank you. That subscriptions, follows, and please follow our YouTube channel, which actually got renamed to Talking in Stations. Let me get that for you. Or McLeod, I don't know if you could find that. That would be great, because we want 1,000 subscribers on there. I think Twitch, by the way, we're undersubscribed. We have like almost, say, 3,000 people on our Discord, but we only have like 1,500 subscribed to Twitch, which is okay. A lot of people don't consume it that way. But if we're even worse on YouTube, because it's a new channel and we didn't publicize it at all. So every chance I get, and there it is, Talking in Stations, YouTube/C/Talking in Stations. Subscribe to that or follow that. I don't know what the difference is there.
I'd highly recommend that you hit subscribe and you ring the little notification bell.
Is that, you mean the audience or me?
The people who are subscribing,
Yeah.
that's because that's what all the cool kids in YouTube are basically saying on their YouTube videos.
Yeah, look, we're learning as we go, and there's definitely a science to this. Well, anyway, all that to say, Talking in Stations had to move from Friday night to Saturday morning at 5 a.m., and it was like, oh my God, brutal. And then as I started to be able to show my wife, look, hey, I have a little following. The people want to see this. It's like a community, and it's building. And my son was like, oh wow, my dad's a streamer. That really gave her a lot of assurances that it wasn't just a waste of time. And because my son admired me, it became a thing. It became a thing that was good, and so that allowed me even more flexibility. And I've been able to work it into, instead of 5 a.m, I could get up and do it at 1600, which we thought was a good time because it's before all the people start getting into fleets in the evening. It's before dinner or around dinner time, and it's not too intrusive on us, because we can do it at in the morning before the day starts. I can still do a whole weekend stuff. Yes, my wife defines what a waste of time is. They say happy wife, happy life, and it's kind of true. Otherwise, it's just friction. I married a very strong and confident and professional woman, so a lot of the stuff that I do, it's just a lot of the stuff that I do to her can look like a waste of time, because video games are for kids kind of thing. She's still in that mindset. And I know this is a hobby, and it's, a virtual world, and I think it has imaginative stuff and all that, but there's still kind of some old world thinking going on. So I have to do, I'm not going to be one of these guys that gets divorced because EVE Online was more important. That's not going to happen. But I need to negotiate like what's worth fighting for and what's not. So all that to say, then we switched it to Sunday, and I forget why that switch happened. It might have been to accommodate my real life, and it ended up being a really good move because it just felt like a good Sunday show. So now Talking in Stations on Sunday 1600 is just a really good time, I think, for a lot of people. And that's where it's at now. So that's how we got there. All right. So Dirk McGurk is probably making fun of me in chat, which I expect. I'll catch up on the reading in just a second. I want to say, again, welcome. That was a lengthy introduction, um, little walk down memory lane. I forgot how we got started. How'd that come up?
You were talking about time zones, and then you went into when the show started and how it moved through the time zones because you
Oh,
wanted European.
Noggin, you're so good. Thank you. So thanks for reminding me. And that was what I was going to say. So the time zone thing was, this show was a Friday night show, and you could see what the population was there that could watch a show. And then when we switched to the mornings, you could see when people join the show and then leave the show because they're getting into fleets and stuff like that. So we've been careful to kind of put the show where it doesn't interfere with people fleeting up and actually playing the game they want to, but they get a little news before or after that, or they could catch up on with the podcast. So that's how that has worked out. And I think 1600 is a really good time. I can go in late to work a couple times a week. It's fine. But it's nice to have this time here because some people are getting home or on their way home and they can listen in and see what's going on. See, these chill streams are really cool that way. They're very flexible. They're not topic or guest oriented in a hard way. Right, McLeod? I mean, the idea was to like get up here and just do stuff.
Yeah, just to talk, just to chat. It wasn't meant to be like, some kind of like crazy pre-produced or like sort of really heavily produced thing. It was meant to be nice and chill and just mostly actually it was about probably more about talking to the audience than talking with
Yeah.
the audience and to the audience than with or to other people that's in the Discord.
Yeah, I think it was a way of, oh my God, look at that. I didn't see all these stream element things. I can't tell what's going on.
Hoffman just gifted
Oh.
5 tier 1 subs because he's a legend.
Thanks, man. Look at that. Really appreciate that. That's and that's how these things work, right? Like that's a great sign of appreciation, and that's what keeps us coming back, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you tell them that that people have like badges now?
No, let's talk about that.
So well, Matterall's been kind of like saying that we should have badges, like sort of the sort of subscriber badges and stuff like that, for a long time, and we've been toing and throwing them for a little while, and because it's difficult to create like something that represents like a brand like Talking in Stations, for example, in a very simplistic way that's kind of good for being quite small. And that's been the bugbear of us for like quite some time. So we've been kind of like toing and throwing as to what to do with it. And I kind of had this sort of inkling, this feeling that like the crescent of the Talking in Stations sort of logo is kind of like our icon, I think. So I was playing around with it and I made a logo which looked pretty cool, but it had like various different elements, and I thought that could work as subscriber badges for various different lengths of time by just like removing and adding it and changing colors and stuff like that. So I put it together. Matterall seemed to quite like it, so I just chucked it onto on Twitch, and now you guys have subscriber badges and stuff.
Those of you that don't know, this, and Dirk said a really nice thing, that I'm a hard worker, and I feel that I am, and I appreciate that. But I also, and he said this, and it's very important, surround myself with really good people, McLeod being one of them. McLeod is started out as an engineer. When he came aboard, we were at INN, and I thought, well, what we need to do is like start training up some engineers so that we can get some personalities, not to have to do all the technical work, and lift the weight off them, starting the show, running it, making sure that it's kind of like a stage manager, but also an engineer, is a combination of both. And that really, because we had so many technical problems, like some voices would be louder than others, and I'd have to wrestle to figure that out. In fact, one of the worst times we had was this. We had, I don't know, 2,000 people watching one night because we had I Want Isk and Scion from the diplomat from Goonswarm on at the same time. And somebody was way too quiet and I was way too loud. And I had to actually do a lot of fixing to make the podcast work out. And that was really embarrassing. We had so many people watching, and we had to like shut it down after 10 minutes and figure out what was going on. It took 5-10 minutes, and it was just terrible. And that's a lot of pressure. So when someone who's a much better engineer than me, like McLeod, came around, I was like, yeah, you want to do talking in stations, and let's be partners. Well, you could do the visual stuff and get that going, and I'll do the guest wrangling and the information and that, and we'll be partners. And McLeod was like, oh no, it's your show. I'll engineer it. We don't have to be partners. Everything, like, he really took a step back because he's so modest.
I was just like, whoa there, boy.
Don't rope me in.
Don't throw all
suck
this
me in.
responsibility on me.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad you took it that way. It wasn't just you being like, no, you're, but I, ever since then, we've grown together in how we put the show together, and he has a lot to do with how the show functions and stuff like that. And you'll see a difference. This is a chill stream. This is me, right? But the shows are much different. They're much more demanding. He gets great visuals to match what we're talking about. He doesn't get a lot of notes ahead of time, so he's really moving fast to get something on screen that looks like what they want to talk about or what we're talking about.
And I absolutely love it when they start talking about lore, because that stuff is really easy to Google.
Well, let's see. There's new Triglavian stuff that we need to talk about, by the way. We'll get to that in a second, Bard Ghost. I know you have a lot.
It's fine.
I have a lot to
I'm
say about that.
still trying to make sense of half of it, so
yeah. I think I still have a video. We'll go to that in a second. But I just wanted to say thanks to everybody that works for Talking in Stations. We've picked up some new people, and there have been people who've worked with us and have left, and I want to thank them as well because they were a big part of the whole thing. We've been trying to do it different ways. The one thing that's been consistent is the fan base, and our Patreon people have been consistent. I mean, we really have seen few of them go over the years, really. And so a huge thanks to everybody who's a Patreon that supports Talking in Stations. It's great. It's allowed for green screens and better mics. I don't know if
we're actually
better mics.
Yeah, we're trying to basically take all the money that you guys are sort of supporting us with and putting it back into the show, so it becomes a better product essentially.
And we're bringing new people on, and all that really helps out. And it's a huge vote of confidence. And again, it just makes it worthwhile. Like everything else, people say, hey, stop that, don't burn out. And I appreciate those warnings. Been at this now for 3.5, 4 years. And it's not the burnout I worry about. It's more like the justification. Like, can we, is there a demand for it? Do people care about it? Do they want it? And a lot of that is shown through by financial support. Also, showing up and participating helps a lot, and giving us good remarks here and there. All that is the way that we judge. Like, are we making an impact? Is this worth it? Because we could do other things, right? We could definitely do other things. And I notice, CSM is a nice time that people really rely on these shows, whether it be Open Comms or Talking in Stations or other shows like Ashtarothi, whatever. It used to be Cap Stable. There's a lot of people that basically give candidates a chance to let you know what they want to do if they get elected, and I think it's an important service. I know that I used to listen to, I guess it was Crossing Zebras, and Xander interviewing just about everybody that one year. I think he did it for 1 or 2 years, and that was great. I work out in the gym, listen to Pro God. He was my captain at the time, so I was happy to listen to that, and it was really good to cheer for your guys and that sort of thing. But I also listened for new people and what they wanted to do, and that's actually how I voted. So at least on me, it worked that way. Yeah, Xander went nuts and did almost everybody in 1 year. And then Cap Stable came around and did a group effort, and they did a very professional job for a couple years, and actually too professional. It was too good. And then I actually volunteered to help Cap Stable on their platform, but it never got off the ground. So I just did it myself about 2017 or 16. And I did about 28 interviews in 2 weeks. They're all about 20 minutes. And then the next year I had a little more help, but I think I pretty much did the majority of them. Again, we did about 20 that time. So it's a lot of work to sit there and to talk to someone that you don't know about what they want to do without it being boring. And I hope that when we do interviews, it's not boring with them. Okay, cool. So all that to say time zones and why are they important? Anyone in here still with me?
Yep.
Does anyone want to? I've been talking a long time, and I'd like to hear, and I'm sure that you guys can talk about this topic too. But why are time zones important in EVE Online?
Well, I mean, everyone has a life. Well, everyone should have a life. Let's put it this way. Like, it's not actually like let's be real here, right? Everybody should have a life, but sometimes people don't. Sometimes people, have their priorities and stuff. But essentially, time zones are like time zones, or what people in Eve kind of consider to be time zones, are the times in a normal working day that people have free time. Free time, whether part of that's consumed with sort of a usual sort of family life, or sort of the normal trappings of coming back from work and having to do certain things to keep your normal life running nice and smoothly. But essentially, you have free time, and essentially that time zone change that free time happens in different at different times of a 24-hour sort of clock, I
Yeah.
guess.
So for every person, they can really only dedicate their time to at a certain time. Like I said, between usually, 5 and 10 p.m. on weekdays, or whatever they can spare on weekends. So weekends, you'll see a bigger population in EVE Online because more people can play. But during the week, there is a time zone wave that goes through the world, and it starts, I guess, technically in Australian time zone, and then comes around or goes actually, what direction would that go? That goes through Europe. Yeah. So you have basically,
Yeah, it goes west.
yeah, it's hard because from the US, you think of, oh, it's a US time zone. And then I guess the way it starts out really is like, I would say it starts in Europe, right? Like you have the European time zone, which is right now through 1800 being the center of gravity for EVE population, I think. That's when most EVE players are playing, and it's mostly Europeans and Americans playing. 1800 are when a lot of fleets go out. That you'll see a lot of timers are set for that, and then that kind of ripples through to the U.S. So you have this European time zone kind of coming, and then the U.S. time zone starts coming and taking its place. It's like a wave, and so U.S. Prime time is I don't know what that is. About midnight Eve time, and then it goes through Russian time zone, I believe, is next. And that doesn't make sense, but that's what I think of it. If I'm up too late, no, Australian's next. If I'm up really late, it's Australian time zone. So actually, an EVE Online player in California, if you want to play late at night, like 11, 12 o'clock at night, when everything's quiet in your house and you have some, families asleep and you have some time, that's when I used to play EVE Online. So I was in Australian corporations quite a bit. And actually, when I applied to Northern Coalition, I did not apply to Destructive Influence. I applied to, I'm forgetting their name, the Australian time zone that CCP Larkin came from. It's VDD, Van Diemen's Demise or something. I don't actually know what that's from. Does anybody know what that's from? VDD.
Uh-huh.
Let's look that up because I'll do it on Dotland. These guys are awesome. I kind of regret not being there because the way I mean, it was a very Van Diemen's.
So Van Diemen's Land is apparently an original name used by most Europeans for the land of Tasmania, which is part of Australia. So that's where that Van Diemen's come from.
Oh, interesting. So Van Diemen's Demise has to do with Australia, which makes perfect sense. And it says right there, Australian-based corp. And Malachi's a great FC in NC. I really like this guy a lot. Don't get to the Silvio Berlusconi of EDD. That's funny. These guys have a great sense of humor, and they're really good. And they were huge in the Fountain War for NC. They were kind of they were the part of NC that was winning that war for HBC and all the coalitions against them. So and the leader at the time, or at least the capital FC, was Larrikin, CCP Larrikin. He now works for CCP, so he's no longer a player or anything. But that was what he was doing. Then that's why I wanted to join him. I really liked the way he FC'd. So I applied to them, and they're like, "Hey, well, what do you drink?" And they're checking me out because they didn't know me from anybody, and I wasn't Matterall. I was just a PvPer. And they were about to say yes, it turns out, but I right before they said yes, my old CEO from my first or second corporation turned out to be in a different corp. And so he said, "Hey, I didn't know you were applying, because I don't know, if you apply to NC, everybody gets to look at it. It's not just the corporation you're applying to, but every corporation NC gets to see who's applying to every corporation, and they get to really crap on you if they want." And the reason for that is it's kind of like we're opening up our radar so that anybody who applies to NC can pretty much get hassled by anybody who's already in NC. And ultimately, it's up to the corporate leader to say yes or no. But that's the way the group protects itself from getting people that are undesirable and stuff like that. And the only way around that is mergers. If you belong to a group that gets merged in, you don't go through that individual scrutiny. So people who joined NC through mergers or corp acquisitions would be like Riverini or Seraph. I forgot his last name already. Bazaraf or something. Or Gene Lerner, who got in because he had some tech skills that they needed, so he didn't go through any kind of process, any kind of screening process, because people would have said, like, we don't want these guys in here, I think. And but there wasn't any of that drama because they got in different ways. When I got in, I applied in, I was anonymous, and so it was just based on kill boards and how I answered the questions and stuff like that. And then I got in right before VDD said, "Yeah, all right." I pulled the app and said, "I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to go with my old CEO because I know him and he's a great guy." So I ended up in Nexi, and then very quickly moved over to Dice because I liked the way Dice played the game. They seem to be my age and my temperament and stuff like that. Although Nexi was great. Nexi actually left to form a different coalition and went to Wicked Creek, I believe. So again, that's how I almost joined VDD in a Northern Coalition. It was an Australian corp because their time zone came after mine. So I'm going to go back to the time zone question. So the first part of the answer, I think, is that everybody can only play a game at a certain point. So as a certain region of the real world, like California, has free time, you'll see an influx of players from that region come in. And where that becomes a really big strategic advantage is timers. All right. So who wants to explain how timers work?
Well, I was just going to say I made a really terrible visualization for time zones and stuff that I posted in Stream Chat a little bit further up. I can relink it if people want, but yeah. I made it ages ago in Google Sheets.
I'll put it up.
I remember about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it up.
Okay, so these are the time zones when people play EVE Online, and that's important because one of the interesting things is that you could a long time ago, when it was just about towers, there was no prime time. Prime time is a newer concept in the last 4 years or so. Before there was prime time, there wasn't any way to well, there was a way, but it was individual per structure. What you would do is you would have a tower. that you could put up, and when the tower was attacked, you could put in this stuff called straunt that you could mine. You have to mine it out, and it's really heavy, so you couldn't carry much of it at a time, and you had to put the straunt in a tower, and that gave you a safety mechanism that allowed it to be invulnerable for a while. And you could put up to a day and a half worth of straunt in there. If you filled the tower up, it would come out to a day and a half, which means that your tower would get attacked, and you would get a signal that it's being attacked and it has been reinforced, it's been knocked out. And you had, when the straunt runs out, you had to be there to defend it. And if you weren't, it was vulnerable to destruction. And so what a lot of people would do is it became very strategic when you attacked things. And you would assume that if you attacked it at midnight, that you would have to destroy it 2 days later at noon. And so that's really important for time zone combat. So you want to make sure that you don't take a tower out. And this is way back then, right? You don't attack a tower and then have it come out when your guys are all asleep. Carry on.
I feel like I'm really gonna miss this particular mechanic, because my personal opinion is this mechanic is a lot better than what we have at the moment with citadels. Essentially, the straunt or the strontium clathrates that you put in there was kind of like a fuel for the invulnerability of the pos once it got to reinforced. You couldn't mess with it once it was reinforced, and you could only open and put more in once the shields got to a certain level, which was basically 50%. So when things like that, it was a nice. The reason why it was a really nice mechanic was essentially, if you filled up all the way, if someone came in their prime time but not in your prime time to fight it and hit it and reinforce it, it essentially meant that it'll come out in something close to your prime time. But if they fought outside of their prime time and you didn't go and immediately counter the attack, it meant that unless you changed the amount of straunt in there before it hit a certain period before it hit a certain amount of damage, that you couldn't actually access the bay. It meant that someone who hits a tower outside of their time zone is more likely to have the tower come out closer to their prime time.
Mm-hmm.
It also meant that people could kite structures, so you could hit it and not actually reinforce it, but take it almost all the way. And then, although the tower would slowly repair itself over time, it wouldn't do it it wouldn't do it wouldn't repair it anywhere near as fast as citadels do. It would take a long period of time to actually fully repair. So you could kind of just every so often poke at it and poke at it and poke at it, and then finally reinforce it.
Yeah. Keisha says that below 50% straunt, I imagine, you could not change the straunt amount. Yeah.
Yeah, below 50% shields is you couldn't then edit the strong base, whatever was in there. That's your reinforcement timer.
Yeah.
Pos towers were an art form in terms of both attacking and defending, because as Mackay was saying, is if you were kiting these towers, so you were hitting them, just taking 10 or 20% of shields every time you hit them, but didn't reinforce them, then the attackers then had to decide, did they want to commit forces to rep the towers? You're talking 5 faxes sitting outside the shield, or a 30-man Bazzy wing slowly repping this, and this thing would take time to rep. It's not you sit a fax out, you triage it for 1 cycle and it's all magically repaired. No, these are you're committing 5 faxes for 2 to 3 cycles on the large towers, out in space, ready to be dropped. Very little defense that you could do in terms of positioning them, because the moment they're triaged, that's it, they're stuck. So you're committing assets. Whereas with citadels now, it's like you plink at a citadel, leave it alone 15 minutes, ping, 100% repaired.
Yeah. Oh, real quick, it looks like 3,000 people fell out of pandemic horde. 3,000 accounts. I'm sure
Oops.
that's house cleaning. They have like 40,000 or something. But yeah,
that sounds
18,000. That's just their inactive purge, most
Yeah.
likely.
yeah.
yeah, that sounds like an activity purge.
For those that don't know, in these alliances, they get built up a lot over time. Some people just disappear, but they're still in the alliance, and after a while, they get purged out. So it's basically purging out your dead. Bring out your dead.
So the thing is with time zones, and especially with the pauses, was there was a lot of interplay with how they worked, which meant that like it actually almost created interesting moments where you'd put people in harm's way. You'd put people outside of stations in space ready to be attacked, kind of thing. And yeah, you can make the claim of like, oh, but if you're repping a tower and people come and try and shoot the people who are repping the tower, they can just go into the tower, and it's like denial of content. Well, that only works. That's only really relevant if they've repped it past a certain period of time. They can put strong back in. If they haven't, then you end up in a situation where you'll throw bubbles up all around the all around the pause, kill the pause, and then kill the people inside the pause.
Been there, done that
So
in Catch
Yeah.
quite recently.
I think we can probably do a better job of explaining this with some visuals. So we'll stop with the time zone tanking for now. It does come into play when we talk about stuff. I want to move on to Triglavian stuff, and I have something up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. Bard, Ghost, and Ash, you guys probably know stuff about this Triglavian ship.
Yeah.
The World Arc.
Yes, the Zordar.
Yeah. I love that.
Matt, can I ask you to just put up the frame image, the one that shows it compared to a Titan?
Can we actually confirm the size of this? Because it's
Yes.
going from battleship
It's confirmed.
to Titan, to Dreadnought, to Titan, to a Citadel, to...
Yeah, no, it is that big. Absolutely. People have flown past it. It is available to see it if you go into C5 or the highest class of Abyss sites. You have a chance of entering into a room where they are constructing and defending this structure.
It is so cool that you have anything called a world arc. That's like, it's the whole population climbing into one escape ship.
So months ago, or well, a couple months ago, Uriel, when the Eve Invasion Tour first was announced, and they showed that image along with the World Invasion Tour, already people like Uriel was equating this as being like a brand new Triglavian thing. And
it was the Dread,
accurately,
right?
It's not just a Dread, man.
No, at the time, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we're getting a Trig Dread."
Correct. Everybody thought it was a Dread, but he was actually one of the earliest people to say that the fact that the tour is called the Eve Invasion Tour, he identified that as being very noteworthy because
it's no coincidence.
Yeah, it's no coincidence. This is turning out more and more and more and more and more to seem like an absolute invasion.
I mean, let's not also forget the background image they use on their marketing for that, which is this ship.
Yep. And
interestingly enough, there's some stuff on the Hobo Leaks about invasion effects as well.
Yes.
Be coming in.
So today they have done
spoilers, but okay.
Well, I will stop from going too deep into it because we have data mined some bits that give away a little too much for the future. But it would appear it's coming soon. Like, announcement in St. Petersburg on Saturday, in by May, June at the least. This isn't a playable ship. I think a lot of us were getting hopeful for that. It's a static, collidable structure. It's going to be used as the staging for, I guess, what amounts to their version of an incursion.
So every clue has basically pointed to one thing, which is an expansion level event in which the Triglavians are, the Triglavian war against the Drifters and Sancha are going to spill over, and Capsuleers are going to have to choose to side either for or against the Triglavians.
Yes.
It is through every single piece of lore of the Triglavians since their release has basically pointed to that fact.
What's interesting is the precursor to this invasion is, and that's probably the wrong word, precursor, because it's used in other ways. But what's happening before we are seeing this or this invasion is that you're seeing the billboards all over taken over by a message from Triglavians. We'll put that up in a second. But also you see the map sometimes changes to triangles, right? Have you guys noticed anything like that? Disturbances in the navigations?
If I remember correctly, somebody posted something about that, but it wasn't a legitimate thing that happened in the game.
Oh,
I haven't heard a legitimate report of that happening.
that's too bad. Okay, so maybe somebody made that. I think no, it was Silver Hysteria that said that he had seen it, but I don't know if he saw it in the game.
I mean, it could. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened. I'm just saying that I remember hearing once that somebody did it, that it was like done for fun, and then some people thought it was real. There might have been a real component to all of this. There's so much going on right now. It's difficult to even assume that I'm keeping track of everything.
Yeah, the last few days have been pretty crazy, to say the least.
One of the weirdest things that's happening right now is that the videos that the Triglavians are releasing to Capsuleers that have the corresponders with the clades, that's how they've revealed the structure schematics, is through these videos. But recently the videos have changed, and they are showing known space locations, i.e. known systems, describing the sun and other astrological conditions of those systems, and more importantly, displaying real Capsuleers moving in those systems as if the Triglavians are. We don't know if there's something special about I think there's been 2 individuals that have been displayed so far. I have not been able to communicate with either of them. I think Makoto has been reaching out to them as well. We don't know if there's anything special about them. We do know that both of them were displayed having a hauler, using a hauler. One was an epithal, and the other was the Caldari freighter, whose name is escaping me at the moment. Heron.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as Bargos was saying, we're heading towards something big, and it's more and more seeming like we're getting very, very close to the next step.
Well, Ash, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's not just that it's seeming. I'd say it's confirmed with the agency redesign that's now on Singularity. It has its own slide on the agency confirming it as a thing, which
I was
wouldn't
unaware
be
that
there
the
if
new
it
agency
was several
was on
months out.
Singularity. I'm going to log on right now.
Yes, it's on there, and it has its own. I don't know what you'd call it, but part of the UI is dedicated to Triglavian invasion.
Oh wait,
So
Singularity though is the Chinese server. You're saying that they got
no. Singularity is the test server.
Yes.
Oh, CC. Sorry.
Serenity.
Sorry, you're right. Sorry, my bad.
So, yeah, and that is actually another big clue in all of this, right? So the Triglavians called out 2 major organizations as being their enemy. One being the Drifters, which is obvious, the ancient enemy. But the other one that kind of surprised us from the billboard video was that they specifically called out the Sancha. Mm-hmm. And that stands out for 2 reasons. One, the Sancha were found in the Shattered Wormholes when the Shattered Wormholes were revealed, which kind of shows that the Sancha probably are involved in all of this in a level that we still don't properly understand. I have my theories. But also, more importantly, Sancha is most widely known for incursions, right? So if this event is designed to somehow replace or supplicant or interact in some way with the current standing incursion system, it would make total sense that Sancha would be one of the major targets.
Wipe them out. It gives CCP an excuse to remove it from the game.
You mean extirpate them?
Sorry, yes, extirpate
That's
them.
the word that the Triglavians use, which
Yes.
means what?
Basically exterminate, I believe.
I'm gonna look that up right now.
Yeah, I never actually followed up the full meaning, but we knew it was basically a
Yeah, to root
exterminate
out
in
or
some.
destroy completely.
Wow. CCP picks such great words. Like, that's such a great word, extirpate. But also, do you remember? I will commute your flesh to dust. You remember that? It's like,
There's some
wow.
very melodramatic
Yeah.
characters.
Oh no, that was good. That was himself, Kubiak Sancha, or what's his name?
Sancha Kuvakai.
Sancha Kuvakai. Will commute your flesh to dust. That guy meant business.
Yeah, actually, honestly, that is still one of my favorite moments in the lore. Like, the live events of Sancho was incredible. But beyond just that, when they released the incursions, they released two different videos. One was that call out by Sancho, which was very good when it comes to like rallying people against an enemy. Like, it was a good presentation of an expansion enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, they also put out what was called a CDIA file by Concord,
Mm-hmm.
which was
Yeah.
basically a breakdown of the history of Sancho Kavaki. And from that day, I have been asking CCP to make more of those because it was so good of a lead into the lore, which, if I could link this back to the Triglavian thing for a second, I really believe that this is another reason why the Triglavian situation is such a big deal, and why our choices in how to interact with it are going to be important. Because CCP has been introducing the concept of the Triglavian lore since Abyss has been released, through the course of like being able to hand in the paperwork into the spheres and get back the correspondences where the Triglavians, like the internal communications between the Triglavians. So you were able to do this kind of roundabout way of finding out stuff about the Triglavians. So we knew most of the stuff that was in that video, but the only people that knew that were the people that really, really paid attention, right? So the fact is that if you're going to make an expansion, or if you're going to do a thing in which knowing what the heck is going on is important, the first thing you got to do is make sure that everyone knows what the heck is going on. And I really believe that that's what that video was it was like, here is the story, or at least the part of the stories that you need to know as we go into the rest of this year.
Yes. Dirk pointed out earlier, there seems to be like a lack of marketing around this. I'd say that's because the start of this isn't going to get marketed. The event is going to market itself, right? This isn't a Invasion comes out in May, all done. It's Invasion comes out in May and the storyline just continues ramping up.
This is actually a continuation of the storyline from Abyss to Proving Conduits to here. It actually all does chain together if you pay
yes.
enough
Well,
attention.
hell, it goes back further, to be honest, with how they've linked it to the Drifters and stuff.
I guess my point is that it's difficult to prove that CCP had all of this in mind back in like the Drifter thing. I think that they had something similar to this, but the point is that from basically the release of the Abyss on, it's very obvious that this is kind of the direction that they've been going. The Abyss and the Triglavians have always been about proving yourself and, you know, all those kinds of notions, which is one of the reasons why they make such a great NPC villain, right? Because like CCP has taken the concept of PvE combat and made it literally part of the lore, where now we are proving ourselves by shooting at red triangles, which is incredible that they managed to pull that off, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Another thing, Ash, just quickly, you said the proving, right? So one of the things we did manage to find today was, you know, we now have the symbols around a gate saying the status. When digging through, I spotted a warning sign that goes above one, and I handed it off to Anasir to translate because I know he knows what he's doing with them. And it is liminal proving. He explained that liminal has come up before in those system scans, so it may have something to do with system proving. Basically if you enter this system, we're going to test, we're going to do what the Abyss does, but on a greater scale, I guess.
Liminal means like the transitional or threshold position. So it would be like their first steps, or like the early. I know, like Sancha incursions have kind of like in the center, they have the hardest ones, and then as you radiate out, there's like 2 or 3 tiers of difficulty. It could be very similar to that.
Okay.
It's very difficult to tell though, because
Anasir is in chat. He said liminal boundary is what they used in the videos, which seems to refer to the size of a system.
I think there's the luminal value, which is based on the sun and related to the what kind of sun there is, like how much lumens, i.e. light, the sun does. Liminal again means initial stage or process. So it'd be important to not confuse those two terms.
He's liminy. I was just kidding. Sorry.
It's okay.
I just I'm breaking you up. Okay, so this is all very interesting. I think it might go over some people's heads who haven't been following along. But what is the explain like I'm 5 years old version of this? We're going to have new incursions or new type of incursions with this new arc that's coming as a base?
Something like that.
That's the increasing guess. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. I totally applaud that. And the idea that Eve is really moving in the direction of letting individual pilots get involved with stuff is so good. I hope that they keep going in that direction. I think the new agency map is a big part of that. And the more and more they put stuff in it, the better, so that people have one place to go to kind of see what's going on, and they can get involved in this or that or whatever.
Is this not just could be a replacement for like the old Drifter incursion? They had
it
that
possibly
before.
is.
Well, so
the other alternative. Sorry, I should just quick though. The other alternative is we see them come back as well, because the belief is that as the Triglavians step up their game, the Drifters are going to match them.
You've got to keep all of this in context, right? So all of this was originally designed because CCP wanted to create an AI, a more advanced AI. And more importantly, they wanted an AI that made a more living universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the original objectives with Drifters was to switch it from a standard aggro-based AI to a decision tree-based AI, which it worked. That was the biggest experiment behind the Drifters. And then from there, they tried the Drifter incursions, and that's when they hit a huge snag. So prior to this, no NPC has shot at another NPC. The AI just wasn't designed to fire at other AIs. In any mission in which there's conflict between different NPCs, that conflict is simulated with just one of them exploding or something like that. So they tried to make a conflict between the Amar and the Drifters where they'd be fighting each other, and you would come in and you would help out. But the problem is that when they deployed this to scale, it lagged out the servers. And so they had to bring it down and then eventually bring up kind of a neutered version of the Drifter or the Drifter incursions that didn't involve them fighting with each other. And while that did make the incursions still work, it meant that their progress in that direction had been completely stymied, which is why we saw a freezing basically of the Drifter plotline and kind of a take back. And they moved more towards things like resource wars and the fobs and the sodios and all those kinds of things, more point location interactivity. However, in the MPE that Ghost came out with, which I can't think of right now, which was the story-driven MPE. At the very end, the NPCs do fight each other, which tells me that they eventually did fix this problem. So, and then the other thing to remember in all of this is that at about the same time that all of this was being developed, CCP was saying things like faction warfare, four-way war, and whatnot. Now around the Alpha program, they established that there were problems with faction warfare, which is one of the reasons why they haven't really dedicated the time and effort into fixing it. But so all of this kind of pieces together with the idea that CCP is trying to make a living engagement between NPCs in which we can interact with and hopefully influence the course of the conflict. And so I see this as their latest iteration of that exact same goal. They've always been working towards this. This is just their latest way of doing it.
And it would seem like it would replace faction warfare naturally afterwards as well.
I would not be.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Anasir has posted the first image. I'm assuming it comes from CCP of the invasion tour. It is the trig text on it is Chapter 1. Would you mind showing it?
Yeah, it's right here.
Cool. Thank you.
It's also worth noting that we are getting new Triglavian stuff. We are getting the Triglavian hack. We're getting a command destroyer, and we're getting one other assault frigate. And they're redoing the entire way that Triglavian invention and creation of things like T2 guns, or faction guns are done. And they're introducing new data cores and other things like that. When asked about where this will come from, CCP Rise, I believe it was, commented that there will be new content, which is where this new stuff will be coming from. So this is not dropping in the abyss as we know it. And the other clue that I have is that data cores, more than anything else, generally come from loyalty point stores.
Is this this is not official yet, is it? This drawing that's up?
According to Anasir, yes, it is.
Wow, how did that come out?
I don't know exactly where it's coming from.
Oh shoot, is that a spoiler? If that's a spoiler, it's gone. I can't do that to people. Let them enjoy it.
It's hard to tell what is or isn't a spoiler right now. Like I said,
that's a real problem,
CCP,
right?
Secret message to people.
I would say that the link is to an Imgur kind of link, like, and that's an image, like a third-party image hosting. I'd imagine if it was, official, then it would be, on a CCP server.
Moving back to the trig ships, it's nice to see CCP actually fleshing out the Triglavian line of ships, and all I hope really is that they make those T2, the T2 and the T1 ships more available, so that they can become, to a point, legitimate fleet doctrines that can be used by, the T2 hacks. They're generally used by bigger alliances. So I hope that it turns out that way.
In general, the goal of the Triglavian ships is to be more effective for smaller groups than larger groups. But yes.
Wild. Okay, we'll look forward to what goes on in Triglavia as Triglavians as they enter our sci-fi universe. Now we have.
I'm going to just drop in here real quick and say that tonight we are doing the Eve Universe podcast, and I will be having Makoto Priano. So we'll be talking about all this stuff on my stream at 0230.
0230. Okay, we'll rehost you, and you can catch them on their channel. And if you need to find it, you can find it through Talking in Stations.
Yep, and of course, once we're done with it live, we'll be, editing it up, and it'll be up on Talking in Stations.
Yeah, Universe is part of Talking in Stations, so you'll see it in your regular TIS feed. It's good stuff. All right. What the heck is going on with Test? Wow, there's a lot of things like a cessation of violence and high sec and
peace in high sec.
Peace in high sec. What's going on there?
Well, from the Reddit post that Vili put out, it looks like the Imperium, Horde, and Test, being the main three characters or influences in high sec around perimeter market, have decided to forego violence, sustain the stabilize the Plex and injector market by not fighting over it, and therefore splitting the profits three ways. I don't know how they've done it or how they've done the percentages, but that's what we've been told. And this was followed up in Test by a post from Vili in the Test forums. So we got a bit more of an in-depth look at it than others did. But it's on there on Reddit, and Vili has a nice post up on.
Right. I'll take a link to that when somebody can get it to me. I've seen other stuff too. It looks like, from what I've seen, first of all, Elo Knights had great success against Legacy. There's a lot of things going on in this region, and that's why Sunday we're going to focus on this region. We're going to have Elo Knight on. We're going to have Pro God Legend on.
So,
what?
Sorry, I just opened up the agency on Singularity, and if you go to Encounters, the first thing is Triglavian invasions. The Triglavian Collective has breached out of the abyssal dead space and are confirmed to have invaded, and there's nothing more.
Oh my God.
Oh, we invaded several
Okay.
systems. The citizens of New Eden must join forces to flush them out before it's too late.
Oh my God! It's sure.
And so there's
Yeah.
forces withdrawing, 100% pirate influence. Yeah.
Well, there
Actually,
goes
you know, it's
that. There goes that announcement.
you know what's quite funny about that actually is so what were you going to say?
Sorry, I was just going to say, has one actually spawned now, Ash?
I don't know. Oh, well, yeah. Actually, they were giving 3 systems that it's in.
Hell, that wasn't there
So-
before, but okay.
So I was going to say that when CCP were coming out with all the various different new graphic kind of things on Stargates and stuff, right? They released a whole bunch of interesting kind of. They released a sort of an image of all the various different types of flagging and stuff like that for various different kind of groups and stuff in HiSec. Which looked pretty cool. And then they had a whole bunch of other ones which looked really kind of interesting, which basically just extensions of that artwork. And I distinctly remember that there was there were a few kind of interesting ones which kind of made people kind of a bit wary or a little bit nervous in that regard. And there was some Triglavian based ones and some like Drifter based ones as well.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, they palmed them off as being tests.
Yeah, just tests, just like it's just our artists, just basically going a little bit too far,
Okay. So more of this on the universe. You can catch it live on Astaroth's channel.
Sorry.
It's all right. And I also want to say that this Sunday, we're out of time. I got to get going. But this Sunday, we're going to have Elo Knight, Pro God Legend, talking about the conflict in the South and what's been going on there. And there just seems like a lot is going on with Test right now.
There's big TLDR about the whole thing there. Just a quick summary is, I think ProGod put it on your show the other week where he was just saying, or it might have been the Meta show where he was just saying attacking another person's Sov, even if they're a little bit weaker than you or have a lower supercat fleet than you, is just so hard right now. Along with the Sov mechanics on top of the jammers on top of citadels, it's just like a 3-layer defense, which unless you're prepared to have fleets up for 12 hours straight in their time zone, and the time zone tanking between China and the EU/USTC of Test, it's just really hard. And then Elo just does Elo. He's a great FC and he just hits hard when he's online, and it's very hard to counter that.
Yes. And Pro God gave him credit for basically just having a winning streak all week last week or 2 weeks ago. We'll see how that fared in this week. But there's also some other stuff that was said. Is there, like, we know now that this group from the Chinese server, PIBC, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're coming over, and from what I hear, they're going to be settling more or less in with Test.
They're taking Omist, as we've been told.
Omist. Let's look on the map where Omist is.
Right far down in the south. Now, what's quite interesting that I've seen from this is everyone's been saying they've been going to Omist, and look at its position and look at its gates, and it goes really close to where Frat are. So they'll have their own content between Frat and them, border or very close to.
Yeah, let's look at the influence map too. That's probably a little bit better. So if you come to Talking in Stations Online, the influence maps are right here, Sov and influence maps. So click on that, and it'll bring up all the influence maps, even Serenity. But we want to probably look at Coalition, since that's a little clearer, and we'll bring that up. So they're going to be going into Omist, which I think is over here. Yes, right over
It's
here.
in the neutral states part down there.
Yeah. What are neutral states? Oh, that's just
Renters.
Renters, yeah, okay. So they're not that close to fraternity. Between these Chinese and their fellow Chinese in fraternity is Tenerife's.
It looks a long way, but actually the gate from Omist goes into Tenerife's, and then it's 2 jumps and you're in dead.
Yeah. And I think they have said, like, we're not here to further persecute the people that we beat on Serenity server, but this just happens to be the best place for us to have activity, that sort of thing. Like, so it's not necessarily a grudge coming from the Chinese server.
I hope that they really stick to what they said when they announced the move, which is no no RMT, no botting or very little botting or as much botting as anyone else I know handles it. Like, you don't want
Yeah.
it. And I just hope they bring a good, what's the word for it? Just another challenge for the normal people on this server. I hope they come into a power of their own to a point.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting because we suspect that there are going to be a lot of players then that come in here. So this area here, at the same time, it doesn't look like the war is heating up. I just think potential for more war is happening, but not the actual war because of time zone tanking, right? Wasn't there something that came
Yeah,
out?
it's gonna be more border skirmishes than anything else. You're gonna see between what I was talking about earlier, between like two time zones, kind of their colliding point, especially the Russian time zone, which kind of sits in between EU and China. That whole time zone is going to be really good for when the Chinese start becoming less numbers and the EU have when the numbers kind of pan out. That's when you're getting the fights happen, and that's when it's really interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Hey, man, this is the first time I'm meeting you. What's your name?
Noggin.
Noggin? Are you in test?
I am. I'm in test. Been in test for about 3 years now, going on. Just,
What's your story? Where did you go before that? Where were you before that?
I mean, I joined test just after World War B. From HiSec. I thought I was going to quit the game, and I thought, well, I'm going to try nullsec before I quit, just to see if I like it. And within 6 months of being in test, I was fighting in the Tribute War, and then got kicked out down to the south into catch. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun, and I've been with test ever since.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it was best. I flew in the Battle of SH1 in an Atron. I
That
had
was
no idea what I was doing.
SH1, I believe,
great.
was a really underrated battle. Is that the one where CO2 got their Titan stuck?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta think of it from my perspective. I was in an Atron. I didn't know what a Titan was, and I didn't know what potato mode was either. And
Oh.
everyone said everyone turn your computer to potato mode. I didn't know what they meant, and I nearly got lanced because of it, because my game.
Lance is a doomsday from a Titan. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No,
hilarious.
it's good fun. It's good fun, and I've been in test ever since. And just yeah, it's just I'm now flying all the capital ships and it's just having good fun, getting more integrated with the community, and like to see where the big picture goes.
Well, you were in test during the good years. Sorry for all you old test guys like Ron, who we're going to raid in a second. Test has never been better than 2018. Like, they're at the top of their game this last year. Before, they were always considered a mob that you wanted to attach to a formidable fighting force. So you had like PL and then Test. And Test would provide like the fodder, just like goons provided the fodder for a long time amongst themselves, but then they became a very serious group, right? Like, they weren't just known as a lot of people, they were known as a lot of good people. And I think Test
Yeah.
made
So
that
Horde
change.
of the trade very recently.
Yeah. And I think Horde's made that transition too, from just a lot of people to actually a formidable force that can bring in some heavy weight and stuff like that. But Test did that a bit earlier in 2018. I think they were clearly demonstrating that they were a fighting force in and of themselves.
Well, you got to put that down to the fact that when we left Vale, I just remember ProGod and Villy getting on, and we had an alliance meeting, and they said, if we don't win the next campaign, we are homeless. We're pretty much done. And I think everyone kind of got their game face on. They were like, right, this is the moment. This is the time. I've never seen Test FCs and Test members fight harder than when they did in Catch, Impasse, and Esoteria, along with CO2 at the time and other allies. I've never seen it since, because they were fighting for a home. They were fighting for like a cause and a purpose at the time. It was really good to see.
Yeah.
And I think the only other time I've seen close to that was when we were defending last year, when we culminated in the Battle of UALX. Incredible stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, it's dramatic. It's some of the most dramatic stuff Eve has ever produced, actually. UALX, top-notch battle historically.
It's the same with any fight that sort of ends with a near extinction level event, like UALX, X47. you know, the Northern forces when Goons were fighting up north, and Test came up with their Titan fleet. You know, it's been such a long time since you've seen such a coordinated effort from NC and PL with Super and Titan fleets and that sort of layout.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Seraph. I don't know why these bubbles aren't working right now, but I'm talking to Noggin and Seraph, both from Test. Well, anyway, I'm sorry to have to wrap up the show at a time when things are getting super interesting. But I'll tell you what, stick with Ron. He is part of TIS. We're going to go to his channel next. We're just going to raid on over. And he's basically very relaxed and going to talk about, he's in Test as well. So you guys can carry on this conversation with him and ask him the questions that you would have asked here. But what I want to do before we go is thank you very much, people who have been subscribing this whole time. Like, it is a really, really nice to see. Blaine, who just subscribed. And I think I have it here. Hoffman handed out a bunch of subscriptions to people. And Juro X3. Yeah, just thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. And if you really want to help out the podcast, if that's where you listen and you just happen to be catching this, right now, Patreon/Matterall, subscribe there and become a Patreon. Gives you a different color in Discord, different designation, and all that kind of stuff. And we really, really appreciate that. You also get behind the scenes stuff, which I guess we don't publicize this, but if you're a Patreon, you get access to the Patreon posts, which basically are our meetings and how we're conducting business and what our goals are and what we want to do. So if you want all the TIS roadmap stuff, become a Patreon and you'll get to listen in on our roadmap and what we want to do and how we're doing. And I'll just tell you, the statistics are fantastic. We get, I would say, an average of 3,000 to 4,000 people listening to the podcast per show. And it can go much higher than that. It can go up like 7,000 people sometimes when we have like Hillmore on, I think. There's some statistics around here. I'm not going to drag them on publicly, but I did release them when we were looking for ads. Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing. We're doing ads now. So if you have AT tournament ads, give them to us. We'll put them on. Won't cost much. And also, if you want to sponsor the show, we'll go ahead and plug your corporation and talk about it. Just contact me to sponsor Talking In Stations. That's cool, man. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Triglavian stuff was super interesting. The test stuff is going to be super interesting. And we'll do a better job on time zones where we actually like map out time zones. Maybe that's one of the things that we should do. I'll work on that.
Thanks for the stream, Matt.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for the stream.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. We are now going to raid. Stick with us. We're going to raid Ron and see how he's doing. All right. McLeod, if you can help me with that, that'd be great.
Yep.
All right. Do I have to stop or do you just keep going?
No, you can stop. You can stop the stream. It's all good.
All right, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you.